Every now and then in the NBA world, you'll see media outlets, websites, content creators, or just fans in general giving their redrafts for a particular class after a certain amount of years have passed, and you see how certain draft selections stacked up compared to who was actually drafted before or after them based on how they've performed thus far in the NBA. And it's always a little fun exercise though. Even, yes, I'm aware it's kind of pointless because it doesn't really change anything for the present or for the future, and of course, hindsight is always 20/20, so it's easy to say years later why a certain player should have gone higher or lower in the draft versus when they were an unknown prospect on draft night. But be that as it may, we're going to have a little fun with this, and rather than redrafting a particular draft class, we're going to go back and redraft all of the Chicago Bulls draft selections from 2010 to the present. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, real quick, guys, we are getting close to 30,000 subscribers, and as promised, I will be doing a giveaway once we reach 30K subs, and by popular demand, I'm going to be giving away three lucky winners, their choice between Bulls tickets for this upcoming season or a Bulls jersey of their choosing. The reason I'm doing an either or is because I recognize that not everyone tuning into the channel is based in the Chicago area and may not be able to attend a game. So I don't want to automatically exclude all of those who would not be able to partake in the giveaway. So if you're one of the winners and you're not living in Chicago or the surrounding area, then you have the option to get a jersey on me. The tickets to the Bulls game will be tickets for two. Don't worry, I'm not sending anyone solo. And guys, all you have to do to be entered is to subscribe to the channel, and once we hit 30K, I will select the three winners using an online generator. And yes, I realize the chances are so slim, but hey, 3 is better than just having one winner, right? So anyway, be sure you're subscribed to the channel before we hit 30K subs. And about 50% of you right now are not subscribed to the channel. So if you're already watching and you enjoy the content, do me a favor and help out the channel grow by hitting the subscribe button. I try not to say that often because I find it annoying when other channels say it over and over on all their videos, but hey, gotta get a plug in sometimes. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get into the topic. So a few call outs on how I'm determining these selections. I am solely basing the redraft based on the current year in question, and basing it off of the Bulls roster constructions for said season, and then I'm not redrafting the following seasons based on who was redrafted the prior year. So I know that's confusing. So as an example, in the 2013 draft when the Bulls selected Tony Snell 20th overall, I would redraft and take Rudy Gobert, who went 27th in that class, and assessing Gobert and his fit on the 2013-14 Bulls roster. And then the following draft in 2014, I would redraft based on who was available and not building a roster that would also include Gobert drafted from the prior year, just the Bulls roster for 2014-15. I know it's a little confusing, like I said, but trying to redraft and build the franchise around prior selections would just be all over the place with rookie scale contracts, players becoming restricted free agents, trying to make everything fit salary cap wise. It just would be a mess. So we're only looking at each individual draft class and who would have made the most sense for the Bulls in said season and how they would have projected to be for the Bulls for the future. It's a little different from a video I made about a year ago where I actually redrafted the Bulls 3 number 7 picks in Lauri Markkanen, Wendell Carter Jr., and Coby White, in which I drafted based on who they had selected the year prior. I may do another redraft of those 3 number 7 picks to see if things have changed. That might be fun. I'll have a link to that video in the description in case you want to check it out. But anyway, let's start with the 2010 draft. So the Bulls had just finished up a season in which they went 500, finishing 8th in the East and getting bounced in the first round against LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. This was Rose's second season in the league, and although he made strides, it just wasn't enough to get the Bulls into contending status. But the core foundation of Rose, Noah, and Luol Deng was there, and of course, this was going into the insane 2010 free agency bonanza that featured the likes of LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh, and the Bulls were going to have the requisite cap space to be able to sign one of these big names, if not 2 of them. But of course, we all know what happened. The 3 biggest free agents all teamed up in Miami, and the Bulls had to settle for their consolation prize in Carlos Boozer. But given the Bulls made the playoffs, that put them just outside of the lottery with the number 17 pick, and they used that pick to draft Kevin Seraphin, which the Bulls immediately traded that pick along with Kirk Heinrich to the Wizards, and this was done really to free up additional cap space to land one of these big name free agents. But based on who was available at 17, there are really 2 guys who stand out to me that they were actually drafted right after Serafin, and that's Eric Bledsoe taken at 18 and Avery Bradley at 19. And in this instance, I'm going to go with Avery Bradley, as I think Bradley would have been a good, strong defender coming off the bench for the Bulls. He would have been a part of that first bench mob with the likes of Ronnie Brewer and CJ Watson, Taj Gibson. So it could have been a player that they really had developed over time to maybe be that starting shooting guard the Bulls never really had when Rose was ascending to MVP level. Now in the 2011 draft, this was when things got interesting because the Bulls had finished with the best record in the league in the 2010-11 season, Tom Thibodeau's first year. It was the year Rose won the MVP, but they lost in the conference finals against, yes, and again, LeBron James, but this time he was with the Heat. Now the Bulls actually had 2 first-round picks as they had their own 30th pick, but they also received the 28th pick in the draft from the Raptors after trading James Johnson. Now with that 28th pick, the Bulls actually selected Norris Cole, who didn't really have the best career in the NBA, but the Bulls traded that pick for the draft rights of Nikola from Spain, who they used as a draft and stash player for a few seasons, but before we brought him over. But instead of doing that, I'm going to keep that 28th pick and taking Jimmy Butler, obviously, who, yes, I know the Bulls took at 30 anyway, but you take Jimmy at 28 because he's available, keep the 30th pick and use that to draft Chandler Parsons. I know Parsons' career kind of fizzled out quickly, but if we're just strictly talking about the season in question and not really looking at Parsons' long-term fit, Parsons actually had a great rookie season. The Bulls could have used him as a 3 or 4 coming off the bench. Keep in mind, this was also the year the Bulls finished with the best record in the NBA, but of course lost in the first round after Derrick Rose tore his ACL, and having a backup scorer like Parsons off the bench would have been what the Bulls really needed in that second unit going forward. Now for the 2012 draft, the Bulls had another late first rounder drafting 29th overall, in which they drafted I don't even want to be reminded of this, Marquise Teague. And the reason this one stings so much is because the Bulls were contemplating on drafting Draymond Green, which is who they should have drafted and who I would select in the 2012 redraft just based on what Draymond ended up becoming and what he also would have just meant to the Bulls and that roster with that grit and grind mentality of guys like Noah, Taj Gibson, and Jimmy Butler. He would have fit right in. For the 2013 draft, I already hinted at this at the beginning, but instead of taking Tony Snell 20th overall, we're going to take Rudy Gobert, who ended up going 27th. Obviously, we didn't know it at the time, even after his rookie season, but knowing what we now know of Gobert becoming a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, multiple NBA and All-Star selections, one of the best rim protectors in the game of basketball, you guys know I'm pretty high on Gobert and was really hoping the Bulls were going to be able to make a trade for him, although he wasn't even close to being worth what the Wolves offered him. But yeah, I mean, if you look at that Bulls team in 2013 and what they could have been able to do to develop Gobert to eventually take over for Joakim Noah, who really started declining in 2015, to go along with Jimmy Butler, would have eventually become Mirotic when he was finally brought over, and Pau Gasol also joining the team at a later time, you really could have done a lot with the defensive dynamite that is Gobert for that team going forward, and you likely don't pull the trigger in going into a full rebuild like the Bulls eventually did. The 2014 draft, if you remember this one, this was the draft in which the Bulls had 2 first-round picks, the 16th and 19th pick, and the Bulls sent both of those picks to the Nuggets, to none other than AK himself. They used those picks to trade up in the draft to select Doug McDermott at 11, which again, hindsight is 2020, because I remember at that time thinking this wasn't a bad move because the Bulls desperately needed shooting at that time. They needed a wing, and McDermott was the former College Player of the Year. He was setting records in scoring at an NCAA level. It was clear the dude could hoop, but of course it didn't really work out with Tom Thibodeau, who doesn't really value players who don't hustle on the defensive end, and with Dougie not being that at all, the Bulls moved on from him eventually in just a couple of seasons. So instead of trading those 2 picks, with the 16th pick, I'm taking the back-to-back MVP Nikola Jokic, who of course went in the second round, and with the 19th pick, I don't know, I guess I'll take Clint Capella, which, I mean, it's 2 centers and the Bulls would have already had Noah, but if we're looking at this from a long-term perspective and who the best player available is and what the Bulls could have built beyond Noah, I mean, you can't get better than arguably the best big man in the game in Jokic, and then Capella, you likely could have just traded down the line for another asset, as he's probably too good to come off the bench in the seasons going forward. I know I'm going through these rather quickly, but I don't want the video to drag on too long. Let's do the 2015 draft, which this one is one of the few I would actually keep the player the Bulls selected rather than doing a redraft, and that was the Bulls selecting Bobby Portis 22nd overall. I mean, really, when you look at all of the players who were drafted after Bobby, I don't see any of them that would be overwhelming favorites to say, yeah, they would have been a better fit than Bobby Portis. Bobby actually fit the Bulls culture perfectly at that time anyway, of higher energy, high effort, that grit and grind mentality, which really died the season that he actually was drafted because Fred Hoiberg took over in Bobby Portis' rookie season. And of course, the Bulls went into a rebuild shortly thereafter, but Portis was the right pick for that time, and I honestly don't think this one I would change. For the 2016 draft, I almost want to laugh because you guys know how I feel about Denzel Valentine, but this was the year where the Bulls greatly underperformed and missed the playoffs in Hoiberg's first season, but finished with the best record among non-playoff teams. So they received the very last pick in the lottery at number 14, and the Bulls decided to select the 4-year player out of MSU in Denzel Valentine, and yeah, not a chance we're taking Valentine at 14 in a redraft, so instead we're going to take DeJounte Murray, who fell all the way to 29. What's funny is that Valentine arguably had a better rookie season than Murray did, but of course Murray has developed into a star talent, a great two-way player, high IQ player, basically everything Valentine is not. There are some other guys that would be intriguing to do a redraft at 14 as well who were still available, one being Pascal Siakam, another being Malcolm Brogdon, who actually won Rookie of the Year. Karis LeVert is another one as well, but none of them really compared to DeJounte Murray, and based on the fact that the Bulls were going into a rebuild anyway that year after the season, he would have been a great piece that you could have really built around in conjunction with Zach Lavine. For the 2017 draft, this was of course the draft night trade in which the Bulls shipped Jimmy Butler to the Timberwolves in exchange for Chris Dunn, Zach Lavine, and the Wolves' number 7th pick, which the Bulls used to select Lauri Markkanen. And although I was unsure about the pick at the time, Markkanen actually proved to be a solid player for the Bulls and that bright spot in those dark days of the rebuild. You could have argued that he should have gone top 3 in a redraft after his rookie season and sophomore seasons relative to his draft counterparts, but Markkanen started to trail off a bit. Teams started to figure out his game on offense. He never really improved his defense, and I think it didn't help that he also had really 2 bad coaches who stunted his development in Fred Hoiberg and Jim Boylan. So because of that, instead of drafting Markkanen based on who was still available at 7, we're going to redraft and take Bam Adebayo. I know most people would say you got to take Donovan Mitchell in a redraft, but given the Bulls had just traded for Zach Lavine, I think Bam would have been a better fit on the roster. Not to mention, I actually like Bam's game better than Donovan Mitchell, and given that what we've seen from Bam thus far and what he's been able to develop into in being an all-star, a fantastic rim protector, yeah, I'm taking Bam over Lauri Markkanen. For the 2018 draft, despite the Bulls doing the tank job to get a shot at Luka Doncic, didn't work out because the draft lottery is never guaranteed no matter how much you tank. And the Bulls got unlucky and landed with the number 7 pick yet again, which the Bulls used to draft Wendell Carter Jr. Although I didn't mind the pick at the time, the guy that I actually really wanted the Bulls to take a chance on was Michael Porter Jr. I thought the guy had a ton of potential but was being overlooked by so many teams because of his injury concerns, which sure, they were valid as we've seen from MPJ since he's been sort of in and out of the league. He's missed significant time, including his whole rookie season, but man, that guy, when he is healthy, is a very, very talented player who still has upside in being a phenomenal two-way player with his size, quickness, and athleticism. I do go a little back and forth on this one though, because although I would want to pick up Michael Porter Jr. in this redraft, I think he would have fit perfectly with what the Bulls needed at that time and the future. But there's also Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who has become another phenomenal player, and unlike Michael Porter Jr. has actually been much more available. I just question the long-term fit with a guy like Zach Lavine, which is why I think I'm going to go ahead and take Michael Porter Jr. in this redraft, but you guys let me know what you would have taken here. For the 2019 draft, this was the year where the Bulls had hoped to tank for Zion or Ja Morant. They actually finished with the 4th worst record in the NBA, but 3 teams jumped ahead of them in the draft lottery, and the Bulls, of course, fell to the number 7 pick yet again and used the pick to draft Coby White. Now, I'll be honest, for falling all the way to number 7, I actually liked that they were able to get Coby at that spot, and he really showed those flashes in his rookie season that appeared to show he was going to be an important piece to this Bulls core. And don't get me wrong, Coby is still a decent player with some upside. I do think that in the right environment and the right role, he could really do well. The problem with Coby has really been his consistency. Now, to be fair, he's never really had a consistent role on the Bulls. His rookie season, he was a scorer off the bench playing the 1 and 2, was kind of getting confusing mixed signals from Jim Boylan on what his role would actually be. His sophomore season, he gets tasked with the starting point guard role, does well in some games, some not, gets demoted back to the bench, then gets reinserted back into the starting lineup. Then the Bulls sign Lonzo and he's back to the bench playing off the ball, sometimes on the ball. Like, his experience so far in the NBA hasn't really been great for his overall development. But be that as it may, given what we know now and based on who is still available at number 7, 7 in 2019. Yeah, we're not taking Coby. Instead, we're taking Jordan Poole, and I was leaning more towards Tyler Hero, even though I really don't like the guy and not a big fan of his game, but he's also kind of exactly what the Bulls have needed from Coby White, a great bench scorer that can be your go-to six-man consistently. Tyler Hero just won the Sixth Man of the Year award. He's been great coming off the bench for Miami, but the reason I'm taking Jordan Poole is because I think he's a much more well-rounded player, a guy who has accepted his role in coming off the bench for a title team, and I believe still has upside potential, while Tyler Hero, you kind of know what you're getting. I don't think Hero is going to revolutionize his game by any means as he starts to go forward throughout his career. Then for the next three drafts, these are going to be kind of easy because I think it's way too early to really be doing a redraft on any of them. The only one I would maybe consider redrafting, but I still wouldn't do it, and that's Patrick Williams. I mean, Patrick has started becoming this more polarizing player among Bulls fans, where you have those who are fully on board the hype train and think he's a future star in the making, while others maybe thought that after his rookie season, now are saying, maybe this guy isn't really going to be as good as we thought he would be and probably wasn't worth taking at number 4. For me personally, I am more on the side of the hype train and do have high hopes for Patrick, but this is going to be a very telling year for him, it being his 3rd season in the league, to really see if he's going to be that franchise cornerstone. But for now, I'm still a big fan of Patrick. I would not do a redraft, although a guy like Tyrese Halliburton definitely would be intriguing, especially considering this was the draft before the Bulls got Lonzo Ball, so they needed a point guard, and Halliburton would have been a great fit. But I'm sticking with Pat. We'll see if that changes in about a year's time, though. And then for the last 2 drafts, I mean, there's no one I would have selected that went after Ayo. I know this was a 2nd-round pick, and I'm really only covering 1st-round picks in this one, but either way, Ayo made all-rookie 2nd team as a 2nd-round pick. Not a chance I'm drafting anyone else who was still available at that 38th pick. And then for the most recent draft, I mean, you can't do a redraft when none of the players who were drafted have played a single game in the NBA. Maybe by next year, we'll have a better understanding of what that looks like at a potential redraft, but for now, Dalen Terry is the guy. And that's it. I know it was a pretty long video, so if you enjoyed it, give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe to be included in the giveaway. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.